Gospel lesson this morning is from the first chapter of Mark, verses 29 to 39. You can find that on page 35 in your pew Bibles. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. Jesus came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. And the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. And in the morning, while it was still very dark, Jesus got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Jesus, everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came out to do." And Jesus went through Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. Here ends the reading. When I was in seminary, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet a man by the name of Peter Story. A great name for a pastor and a preacher to have the last name Story. Peter is from South Africa. He has a presence about him as one who has lived through difficult times. He's middle-aged. He grew up in a country that was divided legally between those who looked like him, were white, and everyone else. He grew up in a country that was divided by apartheid. And so it was a real honor to meet this man and to hear him talk about his experience of being a bishop, of being a pastor to pastors in South Africa at this time. And I confess that when I had the opportunity to go and hear him speak, I didn't know very much about him. You know, there's not much that fits on the blurb on the little poster that goes on the door and on the walls as people are coming to seminary to speak to you. So when he said this, when he told this story about having these experiences, about growing up like that, about being a minister in a country like that, about being asked to preach the gospel, the good news in a place like that, this was all something that I had never heard. And then he got to the heart of the matter. He was approached. He was approached by Nelson Mandela. Mandela came to Peter Story and he said, "I would like you to be my pastor." "I would like you to come and to visit with me." And of course, this was not a conversation that was had face-to-face. Mandela was in prison on Robben Island. This was a message that was passed to Peter Story, and he had a decision to make. A decision that involved ethics, right and wrong. But even more important than that, a decision that involved his very life, his position in the church. In South Africa, his position was guaranteed by the state, the same state that said somebody like Mandela should be in prison, that said people of color, black people, should live in ghettos like Soweto. And so he said he knew that he had a very important decision to make, perhaps the most important decision of his life, because his initial inclination was to say, yes, I will come to you. Yes, I will be your pastor. Yes, I will listen to you. Yes, I will pray for you. And then he realized all of the ramifications and complications that would come with something like that, and he agonized over it. Because he began to think of his wife, thought of his children, and he thought of his family. And he thought of how difficult people could make their lives because of his a decision which to him was so easy. Yes. But then you have to ask the question, well, what did he decide to do? Did he decide to preserve his position and to keep his family safe? Or did he go to be Mandela's pastor? Prayer and discernment and very select conversation with people that he trusted, he decided to do this. He decided to go and to see how it went, to let the chips fall where they may, and to meet this man whom he had only read about in the newspapers, this man who had been dubbed a terrorist. That's what he went to prison for. And they developed a beautiful relationship over time. He learned who he really was. He learned who Mandela was, and he learned whose story was, too. He learned what he had inside of him. And what he said to us as seminarians, but really more than that, as Christians, as people of faith, he said, you all have a decision to make. You have a decision to make every day about whether you accept everything that God is calling you to do or whether you pick and choose. And if you pick and choose, you need to examine your faith. This is not an a la carte kind of thing. We all applauded. I have never forgotten that. I had the opportunity to take him to the train, and I said, what do you really mean about that? And I remember walking along, and I'm kind of tall, and I have long legs, and I remember him being 10 feet taller than I was, and he just looked like he was taking a walk in the park, but I couldn't even keep up. He's just strolling. And he said, you want to be a pastor, right? I said, yeah, I think so. And he said, well, listen. He said, there's lots of stuff that pastors do. He said, some of it you may be aware of, some of it you may learn, some of it may never happen to you, and it only happened to me, but I will tell you this, you don't get to pick and choose. If you don't do some of it, don't do any of it. Go do something else. He didn't pull a lot of punches. He was crystal clear about what it meant to be a person of faith, what it meant to be a pastor, and it has stuck with me. I still remember that moment. It was 10 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. And so I was thinking about that in light of the passage from Mark. I was thinking about Jesus and the disciples. I was thinking about the story that you just heard. The good news this morning. And I was thinking about the status quo. What we do to get along because we don't want to rock the boat. Jesus wasn't concerned about that. This passage goes a long way towards showing that in two different sections. The first is when Jesus heals Simon's mother-in-law. And she gets up from her bed, from her fever, and she begins to serve them. Now, when we read that, often we think that what that means is that she went up and she made tea. She got something to eat. She went into the kitchen. We think that because English is not a very precise language, really. There's not a whole lot of meaning in all of those words. And often we get stuck on one meaning. What it actually means is that she began to work with them. A woman, a middle-aged woman, a woman who had been sick in bed, decided to get up and join with Jesus in the ministry of what he was doing. Friends, that is not the status quo. That is not going along to get along. That's going to make trouble. And then we have the story where Jesus heals He deals with people who are afflicted, who are sick, who have illnesses, who have diseases, who have demons. He goes off to pray, recharge his batteries, and when the disciples come to find him, they say, people are looking for you. And Jesus says, let's go. Let's go throughout Galilee. Let's go to all of Galilee. Every single last place that we can go to, they all need to hear this message. That's not the status quo either, friends. That is not going along to get along. We all know those places that will be more or less receptive to the message of grace and love that comes from God. It's much easier. It's a lot more fun to talk to people who agree with us, who think that that's true, who know that that's true, who have lived that out in their lives. But that's not the message here this morning. Being a person of faith is not about doing things in an a la carte manner. You want a la carte? Order Chinese food. 1 from column A, 2 from column B. Get whatever you want. That's not what this is about. That's not the ministry that Story lived. That's not the ministry that Jesus lived. That's not the ministry that John Wesley lived. It was about going to everyone. It was about being open to everyone. It was about dealing with the people that you knew were going to get you in trouble. Because they need grace too. It was a radical, radical thing that Jesus did. It was a radical, radical thing that Story did. It killed Jesus. It could have killed Peter. Now, we live in a country where we don't have to deal with that. Thank God. You don't have to fight your way into the church doors every morning to be here. But we still have to deal with people who have not heard the word, who will not hear the word, who do not want to hear the word for one reason or another. But it does not let us off the hook from leaving the status quo the way it is. And friends, when we say all, we mean all. Period. Everyone needs to hear the word. You are all equipped to go and do that. It's not just about me. It's about you. It's about all of us. It was about Simon's mother-in-law who had been sick in bed to go and to spread this message of grace and hope and love to a world that needed it. And friends, did you read the news this week? We still need that. Bad. That is the good news for this morning. Is that you have been equipped and called to go and proclaim the gospel. You come here to sing and to pray, to hear scripture read, to fellowship with people so that you charge your batteries enough to go out there and to grab someone and to say, I have something to tell you. I think you need to hear this. And even if you don't, I need to tell you this. And it's tough work. There will be questions and compromises. There will be less time for other things because you spend more time on these things. But the reward is huge. The reward is everything. The grace and love that you have been given so that you can give to others. That's it. That's everything. That changes the world. And it shakes the tree hard.